There is a specific kind of loneliness that has nothing to do with being alone. It is the loneliness of being in a room full of people, laughing at the right moments, nodding at the right intervals, performing the social choreography with reasonable accuracy, and still feeling. Somewhere beneath all of it, like you are watching the scene from behind glass. Present but not quite in it, connected but not quite of it, you have felt this, perhaps for as long as you can remember. In classrooms, where the conversation never went deep enough to hold your attention. In social gatherings, where the topics exhausted themselves before they ever reached the level where you actually live. In workplaces where the unspoken rule was to want what everyone else wanted, move at the pace everyone else moved, and never ask the question that made the room uncomfortable. You asked the question anyway, you always did, and you paid for it in ways both large and small, both visible and deeply private. This video is not going to tell you that being different is easy. It is not, it never has been, and anyone who tells you otherwise is selling a version of self-help that has been laundered of its honesty. What this video is going to tell you is something more useful, more accurate, and considerably more important. The difference you have spent years apologizing for is the most significant thing about you. Let us begin where the truth actually lives, not in the triumphant reframe, but in the honest accounting of what it has cost you to be the person you are. Being different in a world structured around sameness is not a romantic condition. It is frequently exhausting. It means spending an enormous amount of cognitive and emotional energy on a problem that most people around you do not even recognize as a problem, the problem of translation. Because that is what different people spend their lives doing. Translating their inner world into language the outer world can receive without discomfort. Editing their instincts before expressing them. Dimming their intensity to a level that does not overwhelm the people they are trying to connect with. Shrinking the full scale of their thinking into portions that fit the container of ordinary conversation. You became fluent in a language that was never native to you. And you did it so consistently, so automatically, that at some point the performance became invisible even to yourself. But the energy it consumed was never invisible. You felt it. The particular fatigue that follows a day of being slightly less than fully yourself. The relief, disproportionate, almost physical, of finally being alone, finally being able to exhale, finally being able to think in your actual voice rather than the translated version. That relief is not introversion. That is the release of a person who has been holding themselves smaller than their actual size for hours. Here is the structural problem that nobody explains clearly enough. The systems through which most people move, educational institutions, corporate environments, social frameworks, were not designed for the outlier mind. They were designed for efficient processing of the majority. They reward compliance, predictability, and the capacity to perform standardized tasks at standardized speeds toward standardized outcomes. The person who thinks differently, who asks why before they ask how, who cannot invest genuine energy in goals they do not believe in, who experiences the conventional path as a slow and specific kind of suffocation, does not fit this system cleanly. And systems, when they encounter what does not fit, do not typically pause to ask whether the system needs adjusting. They label the misfit: difficult, distracted, oversensitive, too intense. Too much, not enough, unfocused, uncommitted, resistant. These labels arrive early, sometimes in childhood, sometimes in adolescence, frequently from people whose authority gave their words a weight they did not deserve. And the remarkable, devastating thing about labels received early is how thoroughly they can be internalized. How completely a person can adopt someone else's misreading of them as their own self-definition. You were not defective, you were divergent. There is a difference, and it is the difference that changes everything. The first sign is one you will recognize not as a strength, but as something that has caused you genuine social difficulty. You cannot leave an idea alone. While others receive information, file it, and move forward, you circle back. You pull at the thread. You ask what the assumption underneath the assumption is. You question the framework before you engage with the content it contains. You find the accepted answer interesting not as a conclusion, but as a starting point. This has made you appear skeptical in rooms that valued consensus, difficult in environments that valued efficiency, slow in systems that valued speed. But what it actually makes you is something those rooms, environments, and systems desperately needed, and rarely had someone who was thinking, not performing agreement, not processing information toward the nearest convenient conclusion, actually, genuinely, rigorously thinking. The question-asking mind is not a problem to be managed. It is the engine of every meaningful advancement the human species has ever produced. There is a particular experience that many different people share, the persistent, low-grade sensation of being chronologically out of place. Not older in the sense of maturity performed for approval, older in the sense of depth, of having always been somehow aware of things your peers were not yet ready to see, of carrying questions about meaning, purpose, and mortality while the people around you were still fully absorbed in the comfortable shallowness of an age that had not yet asked anything difficult of them. This is not superiority, it is not arrogance. It is a specific form of early awakening, an awareness that arrived before its socially scheduled time and left you navigating a landscape for which no map existed. The loneliness of that experience is real, but so is its significance. You find small talk genuinely painful, not because you are antisocial, not because you dislike people, but because something in you is constitutionally oriented toward depth, and small talk by design operates entirely on the surface. The weather, the weekend, the performance of mutual pleasantness between people who have silently agreed not to say anything real. You can do it. You have learned to do it. But it costs you something that it does not cost other people, because while they are exchanging words, you are aware of everything that is not being said. The entire subterranean layer of human experience sitting directly beneath the conversation, completely unacknowledged, rapidly becoming inaccessible as the small talk fills all available space. You grieve that layer every single time. That grief is not a social deficiency. It is evidence of a mind that was built for conversations that actually matter and has never been willing to pretend that the other kind is sufficient. 3 signs. 3 windows into a mind that the world has spent considerable energy trying to normalize. It has not succeeded. And what follows will explain precisely why that failure is the best thing that ever happened to you. Every person who ever changed anything was first considered too much, too intense, too idealistic, too unconventional, too unwilling to accept the existing answer as the final one, too committed to a vision that the people around them could not yet see and therefore could not yet validate. History does not remember them as too much. History remembers them as the ones who moved everything forward. This is not coincidence. This is not the exception. This is the pattern, consistent, documentable, and deeply personal to anyone sitting with this video, who has spent years wondering whether the thing that makes them different is a gift or a burden they were assigned without consent. It is both, and this is where we stop apologizing for the burden and start understanding the gift. There is a version of sensitivity that the world respects, the kind that produces art, literature, music, and human connection of extraordinary depth. And then there is the daily, unglamorous, frequently overwhelming reality of being that sensitive person, before the art gets made, before the connection gets celebrated, before anyone frames your intensity as a gift rather than an inconvenience. You feel the temperature of a room change before anyone speaks. You carry other people's unspoken emotions home with you and process them alongside your own. A piece of music, a particular quality of evening light, a sentence in a book that lands with surgical precision on something you had never found words for. These things do not merely register for you. They move you, physically, completely, sometimes inconveniently. The world has frequently told you this is too much, that you are too sensitive, that you need to toughen up, develop thicker skin, learn not to take things so personally. What the world was actually telling you, without knowing it, was that your instrument was calibrated to a frequency the average person cannot receive. That is not a malfunction. That is a specification. The most profound contributions to human understanding, in every field, across every century, have come from people who felt the full weight of being alive and refused to look away from it. Your sensitivity is not the obstacle between you and your potential. It is the very mechanism through which your potential operates. Feel it, all of it, without apology. There is a particular form of courage that receives almost no cultural recognition, the courage of refusal, not dramatic, defiant refusal, not rebellion for its own sake, but the quiet, persistent, privately costly refusal to invest your one life in a direction that your deepest self recognizes as wrong, regardless of how reasonable, how safe, how socially approved that direction appears to everyone observing from the outside. You have felt this refusal operating in you, perhaps when you walked away from something that looked like success but felt like slow disappearance. Perhaps when you chose the uncertain path over the guaranteed one, because certainty in the wrong direction felt worse than uncertainty in the right one. Perhaps simply in the daily resistance, the inability to manufacture enthusiasm for goals you did not choose, toward a version of your life you did not design. That resistance is not laziness. It is not ingratitude. It is not the character flaw it has sometimes been labeled. It is integrity, the deep, structural alignment between who you are and what you are willing to give your life to. Most people compromise that alignment so gradually, so reasonably, one small concession at a time, that they do not notice it happening until they are living entirely inside a life that fits them the way a borrowed coat fits, functional, but never quite right. You noticed, you resisted, you kept refusing, that refusal has cost you. And it has also saved you from a life that would have been comfortable enough to stay in and hollow enough to slowly diminish everything essential about you. In conversations where consensus was comfortable and challenge was costly, you said the true thing. In relationships where the easy path was agreement and the honest path was conflict, you chose honesty and paid the social price that honesty frequently extracts. In your own interior life, you have been ruthlessly unwilling to maintain comfortable illusions about yourself, your circumstances, or the people you love. Truth-seeking at this level is not intellectual exercise. It is a compulsion with moral weight. And it operates at a cost that comfortable people who have made their peace with convenient fictions, do not pay and therefore do not see. But here is what that compulsion has built inside you, quietly, over years of practice, an interior that can be trusted. A compass that has not been calibrated to approval or comfort, or the path of least resistance. A mind that, when it reaches a conclusion, reached it honestly, through examination rather than convenience. In a world saturated with performance, with curated presentation, with the sophisticated management of perception, a person whose relationship with truth is non-negotiable is not merely different. They are rare, and rare in the right context is precisely the right thing to be. This last sign lives deepest, the one that has been present the longest. The one that is most difficult to articulate and most impossible to dismiss. It is not arrogance, it is not delusion. It is something quieter and more persistent than either. A low, steady signal that has been transmitting beneath the noise of ordinary life for as long as you can remember. The sense that your existence has a particular shape. That there is something you are here to do, to build, to express, to contribute. Something specific enough to feel almost like a name you have not yet learned to pronounce. This knowing has survived everything. It survived the years when nothing was working. It survived the voices, external and internal, that labeled it as naivety or ego. It survived the long seasons of doubt when the signal grew faint, but never, not once, went entirely silent. That persistence is not wishful thinking. It is the most reliable data point you have. Because purposeless people do not carry that signal. People living lives that are correctly sized for them do not feel the persistent, quiet pressure of something unlived pressing against the interior walls of their existence. You feel it because it is real, and it is real because you are, despite every detour, every delay, every season of misalignment, moving toward it. Research on divergent thinking, the cognitive ability to generate original solutions by moving across categories rather than drilling deeper into existing ones, consistently identifies it as the foundational mechanism of creative and intellectual breakthrough. Divergent thinkers are, by measurable definition, people whose minds do not follow the expected path. They make connections that linear thinkers cannot see. They ask questions that sequential thinkers do not think to ask. They produce solutions that conventional frameworks could not have generated. because they were never fully inside the conventional framework to begin with. The traits that made you difficult to categorize in systems built for sameness are precisely, specifically, and without exception, the traits that make you capable of contribution those systems could never produce. Your difference was never the problem. It was always the answer waiting for the right question. You were not made to fit. You were made to expand, to push against the existing edges of things until they give way to something larger, something truer. Something that could not have existed without someone willing to remain genuinely, stubbornly, beautifully themselves in a world that offered considerable incentives to become something more ordinary. The person who never quite fit the room was never meant for that room. They were meant to build a different one entirely. And the most extraordinary thing, the detail that makes this not merely motivational but genuinely true, is that you have already been building it, in every refusal to shrink. In every question that made the room uncomfortable. In every moment you chose depth over convenience, truth over comfort, authenticity over approval. You have been building it all along. You just needed someone to point at what you were constructing and call it what it actually is, a life worth living, on terms worth living it on. Before this video ends, I want to leave you with something that requires more than a passive response. Think about the specific way you are different, the particular quality, tendency, or trait that has caused you the most friction in the world as it currently exists. Now ask yourself this: what would become possible in your work, your relationships, your sense of purpose, if you stopped managing that difference and started building from it? Not someday. Not when conditions are more favorable, not when the world becomes more ready for what you carry. Now, as you are, with exactly what you have. Leave your answer in the comments, not the polished version, not the version edited for approval. The honest one, the one that has been waiting quietly for someone to finally ask the right question. Because the right question, for someone like you, has always been the beginning of everything.